Hello, everyone, and welcome to When Tomorrow Comes. This is ICNew's regular look at the world of planning and development. This week, I'm joined by my regular co-host, Ashley Cook. Hello, Ashley, how are you?
Hi, Dan. Good, thanks.
I'm also joined by two of my colleagues from the Transport Department, Clive Burbridge.
Hello.
And Mike England.
Good afternoon.
Hello. So, as you may have seen in this week's email, we are talking about low traffic neighbourhoods. As Mike was good enough to pen the article, I think we'd hand over to him for a bit of a summary about what the subject of his email was. Mike, over to you.
Sure, no problem. So, low traffic neighbourhood schemes, they're starting to be implemented right throughout the country. It's not just a London thing. And the aim of those is to sort of encourage sustainable transport to be undertaken and discourage car use, certainly for those sort of short distance trips, at least anyway. And therefore, as a result, hopefully sort of reduce some of the cars on the road, make the roads much safer, and address some of the emissions issues from vehicles as well, sort of thing. So that's where the article came from.
Okay, so they've gathered quite a lot of publicity. Clive, would you be able to expand on why they've been quite so divisive in terms of sort of like the public sort of responses to low traffic neighbourhoods?
Yeah, I think it's the car user versus the homeowner, isn't it? It's the same old thing. These routes are allocating space back to the public to use sustainable modes, which live in that area, you're probably welcome. However, if you're a driver that goes through that area and you're now faced with a longer route round or more congestion as a result of it, because roads are condensed into one in terms of traffic, one being given over to road space, then there's clearly, a real concern from the drivers that they're being disadvantaged. And you do have to argue, on the flip side, is that creating more pollution by putting more congestion there versus creating a better road space outside the house or through the through street or whatever. So there are definite pros and cons.
Yeah. Ashley, do they have a point? I mean, are drivers justified in complaining about the fact that they've now got to drive further? Or are they sort of, do they have to wake up and smell the low emission zone?
So I think that there's a bit of a misconception about low traffic neighbourhoods, and I think that for a lot of people they don't understand that actually the whole point of them is to create some inconvenience to then create a behaviour change. And there is going to be a period of time where people are not happy with the length of time it takes them to get from A to B, but hopefully that makes them stop and think about whether they need to get in the car in the first place. I live in one of the local authorities which has removed all their low traffic neighbourhoods as a result of petitions from local people and businesses. And I understand some of the concerns. I think one of the major concerns is about emergency vehicles not being able to get to hospitals or to patients in time. And I think that is really, really important. And I think that one message that is coming out is that low traffic neighbourhoods can be really beneficial. They can result in behaviour change, but they need to be implemented properly. And I think that is maybe where this has gone wrong. I think that perhaps there hasn't been enough consultation with businesses to understand how services and deliveries can continue, and there hasn't been enough consultation with emergency services either. But my concern is that local authorities like Wandsworth, where I live, have just removed all the low traffic neighbourhoods. And is there an opportunity for this to be done properly a second time round, or is that the end for it? Because I think that it could be a really good thing in the long run.
Mike, back to you. How do we do this properly then? How do we get local people and local businesses on board with low traffic neighbourhoods?
Well, Ashley's touched on it there, and I've sort of mentioned it in my article as well. I think proper sort of consultation with local residents and local businesses in these areas to fully understand what the issues are, where sort of certain measures can be implemented properly, and then a proper sort of design process whereby you sort of look at where the traffic is and what can be achieved. What's happened over time is obviously a lot of these areas have been designed with the major roads for heavier volumes of traffic to be catered for. But because of congestion and things like that, vehicles have sort of sought different routes, rat running through residential streets, making it sort of much more unsafe and heavier emissions for residents living and walking and cycling in these areas. You had a sort of discussion recently about cycle use and how sort of perhaps people sort of have a bit of intimidation and fear about sort of cycling through these areas. If you can sort of implement these low traffic neighbourhood schemes properly, then you can certainly sort of encourage some of these short distances to be done on foot or by cycle.
It's a good point, isn't it? I mean, you know, if you're going to put these low traffic neighbourhoods in place, surely you have to give people tangible, realistic alternatives to car use. So, I mean, if you're taking away some opportunity with one hand, what do you then have to give back to encourage people to adopt lower carbon forms of transportation? Clive, is that a public transport issue? How do you incentivise people to ditch the car?
I think it's more fundamental than that. I think it's going back to basics. This isn't new. You think 30 years ago, I remember as a student doing my degree, going around the Vernos in Flanders and Netherlands. And they're called living streets, where you reduce the speed of the traffic down. It's about the quality of life, not the speed of life, the pace of life. And they're properly consulted on, they're properly looked at, and they sort of took off in the UK as they were called home zones in the UK, but we never fully embraced it. And these low traffic neighbourhoods seems to me to be a reaction of COVID that's trying to seize upon old school thinking, old school ideas, where we're rushing it, and we're rushing it for obvious reasons. I think if they're properly consulted and we go back to the original principles, they spill out of Holland and the Netherlands instead of Flanders and that. Get both. You get the public transport with the car, and everyone's friendly, and everyone understands where they're coming from because it's embraced in the culture. But it's not bang, gut reaction, we're just closing the street. And I think that is half the problem. It's not the alternatives aren't there, it's just people don't like being told overnight what's happening. Don't like being told what they're doing.
So it's a good point. Ashley, if we rushed into this, do we need to give more of a thought about reducing people's need to travel and actually saying, well, you're getting in a car to drive somewhere half an hour away. How do we give you what you need on your doorstep? So do we need to plan for integrated communities better to reduce people's need to travel in the first place?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think it comes back to this consultation point, but it's also a bit of an educational point. You know, I think that for a lot of people, the car is understandably the easiest, the most convenient way to get around. And when you've got a family or you've got a busy lifestyle and a business to get back to run or something like that, then I can totally understand why people would just opt to jump into the car in the first instance. But I think there is potentially a sort of education piece which says to people in advance of any sort of low traffic neighbourhood or any other sort of intervention, the reasons why it needs to be implemented and the other options that are available to people as alternatives. And I think as well for people with families, it's getting the kids involved as well and saying, well, actually, would you prefer to jump in the car or would you rather be on your scooter or your bike and that sort of thing, you know, almost kind of educating upwards from the kind of younger population who in the end sort of climate change and air quality is going to affect the worst in the long run, and using them to influence sort of the adults who actually have the power to make the decisions and to drive the car and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there is a sort of fundamental debate here about lifestyle change, isn't there? About making those personal choices. There is only a certain amount that government can really do to sort of legislate and plan for this stuff. Ultimately, we have to take responsibility for our own neighbourhoods and our own communities. So really, to wrap up, I'm going to go around the panel and ask everyone, what's the one thing that individuals can do to mitigate their own personal transport emissions, and what changes would they like to see implemented by government to encourage people to undertake more sustainable forms of transportation? I'll start with you, Clive.
I suppose the one thing you can do is question the need for that journey, and at the same time as questioning the need, question the mode you need to take for that journey and whether it has to be the car. And the one thing I'd probably like to see is I actually am in favour of low traffic neighbourhoods, but I just like to see better consultation and better education.
Mike, is there anything you think that people could do individually to take responsibility for this?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to capture it in sort of one particular item. But
Sorry,
I think
it's a bit of a hospital pass.
But it's really, as sort of Clive said, people sort of thinking about you know, how they could sort of change their own habits and behaviour. These have sort of been built up for years and years and years, and as Ashley rightly sort of says, the car is often the easier option to take, but in the sort of long term, the healthier, more sustainable process of sort of walking and cycling for certainly the short trips to the schools or to the shops and things like that really needs to be thought about. And there's a lot of different measures out there coming forward, not just low traffic neighbourhood schemes, but things like electric bikes and scooters, walk to school schemes, electric vehicles coming forward, various different measures. And it's just about sort of knowing about those alternatives, really. And perhaps that's about people educating themselves, but also the local authorities sort of educating people as well.
Okay. Ashley, what do you think, sort of, given your experience of low traffic neighbourhoods, what could a local authority do to get people to engage with the process better and stop seeing it as being thrust upon them by local government?
Yeah, I think people need to understand the wider benefits of it and why it's been implemented. I think from the comments that I was seeing from local people, nobody understood really why this had been implemented and why it was impacting their journeys or their businesses. So I think there probably needs to be a long-term sort of program of kind of education, promotion of what's needed and why they're going to do it, and also offering people those alternatives. I think it comes down to individual people, but also businesses. I think, for instance, I saw online the other day a builder who is now using an electric sort of cargo bike. That's how he gets around and does his work day to day, whereas actually historically we've always been told that sort of tradesmen who need a lot of tools, it's impossible for them to get around without the use of a vehicle. And I think, you know, we're now in a stage where there are lots of different alternatives, whether it's electric vehicles or whether it's cargo bikes and things like that, that mean that really there is an option out there for everyone as an alternative to a car. You just need to find it. So yeah.
Okay, so that pretty much wraps it up for this week. I'd like to thank our panellists, Clive, Mike and Ashley. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And see you all next week. Thanks.
Bye.